Hello Internet, this video is part of the Jeep project playlist on Scott's Garage, where I have been doing a complete frame-off restoration of our 1946 Willys CJ2A. Now this video is also part of the wiring harness playlist on Scott's Garage, where I am rewiring this Jeep and I am using a complete wiring harness kit sold by Kaiser Willys Auto Supply. You can get 10% off this kit by using my discount code SGarage. Now this video is part 2 of 3 of wiring in what's called the main harness, which is both in the engine bay but also behind the dash. It goes through the firewall. And then the right side harness, which does the same, the dash, but then it goes back through the firewall on the passenger side. Now it's been a while since I posted a video. There's a reason for that. Up until this point, I would always say that this is a joint project between my 90-year-old father, Doug, and myself. Well, my dad passed away about a month ago, and that's why I have not posted a video for quite some time. He made it to age 90. I believe wholeheartedly that I will see my dad again. It is the promise that Christ has made, Jesus Christ, who said, "Whoever believes in him and is baptized will be saved." And I know that Dad had a genuine trust in Jesus, that God worked in him, and also he was baptized and received the blessings of that washing of rebirth. And I fully expect to see my father again. Keep watching. So when I last recorded over 5 weeks ago, before my father's death, I used the schematic, the wiring schematic that came with the wiring harness, and it's very simple. Everything's marked as far as description, 16 gauge, abbreviated red wire, white tracer, and so forth. And it's there. It wasn't the easiest thing to follow though. And since then, I have come across a really clear schematic that's in color, and I'll put a link in the description below where you can see this online. And what's really cool about this is that you can set the exact specifications for your CJ2A. So keyed coil under the dash, no. I'm going with I am going to use a key, but it's not a keyed coil. A standard coil on engine is what I'm using, and 3-post junction block, horn on fender, and so forth. So I simply clicked it, and it makes it appear exactly the way my Jeep is being wired, and was very, very useful. And there were a couple things I was not clear on using this. One was the ammeter or the ammeter, and as I wired it, I just wasn't clear, wasn't sure. Normally I think of red as being positive and so forth, black as being negative, but it is this way. So, and I'll show you on the ammeter itself that the positive, what's on the positive of the ammeter is actually the black wires. So a black with 2 tracer and black with 3 tracer. And then the negative post are the red wires. And then secondly, the ignition. And I should explain the ignition. Before this point, we simply had a switch on, off. I do want a key. I am wiring it though how it originally was, meaning that I will use the push start on the floorboard for the starter. I'm not modifying that. I'm not putting a solenoid starter in place with the original. However, I am going to have a key, and I'll show you exactly what I figured out. And I simply want to use the key to turn on so that it powers the coil so that a person cannot start it without the key. You technically can turn the starter over without the key no matter what, because it's wired hot, but you wouldn't be able to start it again without the power going to the coil. So let me show you that detail, and then we'll get back into the video. Okay, here's the actual website. And again, I'll put a link in the description below. It's on Electrical Harness Index Tech Tips. And I love this. It is so easy to use. So we have options here. So for instance, left-hand corner, right now it's keyed coil under dash. That's not what I have. I have a standard coil on the engine. So you can see how it changed it up here. So I'll go back, okay, key coiled on dash. looks like that. And then standard coil, you can see it changes the wiring here. And 2-post junction box or 3-post junction box. I have a 3-post junction box. And you can see the change right here. Horn on firewall, nope. Horn on fender, bam, there it is. And dash lamp toggle switch or switched with headlamp. And I have a dash lamp toggle switch right there. And then finally, single tail light, which is standard for this, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have a dual tail light, so I'm changing it to there. There we go. So very handy. This is the way to go if you do any electrical on the CJ2A. So my hat's off to the tech who put that diagram together. Very, very useful. Now let me show you exactly on my Jeep. Okay, here's the back of my ammeter, or as I always thought it was called, amp meter. If you have a comment on that, leave it below. What's the correct way to say it, ammeter or amp meter? So you have the 2 black wires on the positive side, 1 black with the 2 red stripe and 1 black with the 3 red stripe. And then on the other side, you have 3 wires, 2 of which are already joined together from the harness. That's red with 3 stripe, but then also another black with 2 stripe on the negative, and that goes to the starter. And it goes to the battery post. It's right here, the battery post of the starter. I'll get a different angle so you can see the starter switch a little bit clearer. Okay, so this is the starter switch, keyed starter, I should say. And again, I'm not using it like with a solenoid starter, anything like that. It's simply turn the ignition on for power to the coil. So you cannot start the Jeep. You can turn the engine over, but you can't start the Jeep without the key. And so this wire right here is the one that comes off the negative of the ammeter, and it goes to the battery post. And then there are 2 other wires that go what is called the ignition post on this starter, and those are joined together. So that's how it's going to work on my Jeep. A few other things that I discovered is that the blue wire with this end on it, this is not the dashboard light that goes above the speedometer. I was incorrect in my first video on the wiring harness. This instead is the high beam light indicator, and here is the original casement for that. I cleaned it up and there's plastic in it, and it fits in here. So I'll be just pushing that in place. I don't know if I can do it like this, but yeah, there we go. So it just fits just like that. And it is going to go right here. So that will go in place there. Secondly, it's a black wire that is for the dash light. And it comes just as a single wire in the kit. And this is how it works. So here is the casement for the light. This is the back side that goes through the dash. And so what you do is you actually put the male end through the front side, like so, and just pull it through. Now I've ordered a 6-volt light for this, and so I'll have to wait. Well, I can put it in place, and this is the cap, the original cap right here. And then that again will mount right up here, and it ties into the separate little switch that I'll be putting in over here. So we're going to do that right now. And to do that, I again have this in place here. And I'm going to take the male end of the black wire, push it through. Again, that's going to hook to a switch. Now here, I'm going to put the star washer, or actually the nut, and then the star washer. And then on the back side, that's going to screw in there. So I got that flipped around. There we go. and it is a 7/8. And I think I can sneak this wrench up back here. The old bulb actually is not burnt out, so I think I will try that bulb. There we go. Okay, I'm going to install the switch that will turn on the dash light. And this is not an original switch, but it's what I had around. Actually, I originally used this for the starter switch, but I'm going to put an actual ignition switch in. So I'll use this switch for the dash lights. And it's going to go right here. And these leads are not original, obviously. There's PVC on the wires, and I just did this up. I didn't want to cut these wires, the red and the black, from the dash light, and so as not to cut these off. Probably the original switch had a female that you would just plug in, I'm assuming. I don't know for sure, but again, I put these leads on there, and so I'll be simply putting the black to the black and put it in there, and crimping the connector, and likewise with this side, doing the same thing, and be putting it in place right here. I think I'm ready now to attach to the dash what's called the main light switch. This is an original switch, and I've double checked everything. I'm positive I have everything in there correctly. Now there's a little set screw here, which I've already backed out. In addition to it being a set screw, it does screw in as well. I'm going to take that off. Again, it's original, so it doesn't look pretty. I'm not sure I can fix that, but I am going to use it. I'm assuming it works. I don't know if this switch works. So likewise, I'll put it in there, put the star nut on there, and then the other nut. And it goes up behind here. And there's a slot on the top side and the bottom side. Pretty tight fit. There we go. And this nut is a 5/8. All right, there we go. So I'm going to move back to the ammeter, and you may have noticed that I had it through the wrong opening. I just noticed that in this schematic, that the amp gauge or the ammeter, it goes in the upper right. Here's the choke, and it's just right below the choke. And I just have one more wire to put on. So this is an individual wire. It's a black with 2 white stripes, and it goes from the negative lead, which here already has 2 red leads going to it, but there's so a black, and it's going to go over to the ignition key. So I took the nut off already, and simply going to add this to it. And there's a little washer and then a nut. I'm going to let it hang in place. I'm not going to put the gauges in yet. I'll wait and do those all at the same time when I'm confident that I have everything done correctly. So we're going to move on to the ignition switch. I'm putting the ignition switch right there. And looks like on the negative side, I already got the positive side ignition switch on there. On the negative terminal, I need to use this single green wire, and that's going to go from the ignition switch to the fuel gauge. Okay, we're going to hook the green wire now up, and this will be, it says negative side on the ignition switch, and what I think that is where it actually says ignition. So the battery side would be where it comes off the ammeter, and so I'm going to put it right here. And that then goes to the fuel gauge. Okay, here is the fuel gauge. It came with the Kaiser Willys kit. And it goes in this location right here, according to the schematic. This is the harness that goes to the fuel tank indicator. And the asbestos loom goes closest to the tank, so it'll hook in here. And this will run along the frame here, the tub, and comes in this backside. And I'll tuck all these wires in carefully as we go here, but for now, just going to put it in right like that. Now I am a little bit confused on the fuel gauge. There are 3 leads. I'm assuming one is a ground. So it's positive, negative, and then it says S, but I'm assuming the middle one is ground. We'll find out. I can always add some ground wires. And for now, I'm just going to leave the bracket off and just put the nuts in place here. Okay, according to the schematic, on the right side is the green wire coming off the ignition switch, and then the red wire, which is on the back here of the positive, will go back to the fuel tank. Again, green, left side. (5/16). Okay. Red side. Left side, as you look at the gauge, corresponds to the positive terminal. All right, it's going to let it drop there for now. Okay, next I'm going to, simply for testing purposes, put the lead that goes on the top of the gas tank to the sensor, the float sensor, and I'm not going to hook up the loom yet. It snakes itself around the tub, and here's a clip here that will screw into place, but I'll wait till I button things up for that. But for now, just putting this lead on here. Sorry for the background noise. I have a propane heater going. Now, this wiring schematic is really useful. sometime I'll take you online and you can put in your options for your layout. I don't necessarily have that reflected here. But one of the things that's very clear on here is that the gray shaded components require a chassis ground. So like the horn brush and the generator, the starter, the voltage regulator, but also the fuel gauge. And with the fuel gauge, the central prong is the ground. Now, the wiring kit came with some extra black wire, and I've already pre-measured this. And so I'm going to cut it right here. And I'm going to create a ground. I do have a grounding strap somewhere. And I eventually will be adding it to join the engine block to the tub. However, the tub is firmly established with bolts into the chassis and the frame, and that. So I'm going to create my own ground. I noticed a pre-drilled hole down here. I'll show you that in a minute. But I'm going to create a lead here, and I'll hook it to the grounding prong, and then the other side a lead that will be going to a nut that very firmly goes to a chassis ground. Okay, so I tried installing it, but the bracket simply wouldn't allow me to. By putting the wires on first, I couldn't get the bracket tight enough. So I think this leaves me simply to put this in place. I'm going to pull the wires back, and then I'll have to put it in place, and then put the wires on and put the nuts on from inside the dash. Which is kind of a pain. I don't know how else to do it. All right, fuel gauge finally in place. Okay, last thing we're going to do is hook up the ground for the ground wire for the fuel gauge. And you should be able to see it here. I'm probably going to be in the way here, but right there is the hole that was already in the tub, and I've rimmed it out. I've cleaned it out. I have a pretty good little bolt here. Okay, that's nice and firm. Hopefully that won't bug me too much. Two final things to wrap up this part 2 of 3. This is the ignition switch, and I'm going to put it in place. This is what I have found works for me. I have a large washer, thick washer, 2 of them actually. And one's going to go on the inside, like so. And I want this to be straight up and down, which it is now. And then another thick washer on the dash side. I think this ignition switch you can use on different models of the CJ, and so in order for it to work in the CJ2A, this is what I had to do. So just hand tighten for now. Okay, it's hand tightened, and then just the regular pliers on the wider setting. Carefully, I'm just going to tighten it, hold it so it doesn't spin as far as the key part of it. Okay, it's good. The last thing is I want to put the bracket on the ammeter. Okay, so I want to put the bracket now on the ammeter, and you have to do it from the inside of the dash. So I want to show you now before I do that. So it's engineered very closely. You don't want to ground out any of these main terminals to the bracket. And you can see that it fits precisely, and there is space between the bracket and those two terminals, which is very important. And what I'll be doing is I'll be putting the ammeter in place and then putting a washer and a nut on each of the black posts there, and then tightening. Okay, this part 2 of 3 of the main wiring harness on the right side is getting rather long. I want to wrap up this second video, and I want to test some things first. I've hooked the battery terminal up, and so what I'm going to do is turn on the ignition, and the fuel indicator should register. And then secondly, I'm going to turn on the dash light. So let's give this a try. Okay, there we go. Fuel gauge is working, and now the light switch. There we go, perfect. Hey, I hope you got some value from this part 2 of 3 of the main and the right side harness. If so, please give me a like. It costs you nothing, but is a great value to me. And we will see you in part 3.